The moons and stars were hidden from sight, making that particular quiet night especially dark. Movarth revelled in the all-encompassing gloom, for his eyes were keen, and he could see as well in the darkness as he could in the full light of day. This gave him a distinct advantage in his profession, for he was a hunter, and his prey were exclusively nocturnal. It was on this murky night that Movarth visited a Cyrodiilic priest who knew extensively of vampires. With the priest's knowledge in his arsenal, Movarth would be unstoppable. He probed the priest for information on the manifold bloodlines of Tamriel, and the old man proved himself to be as wise as he was wizened. First, the priest told Movarth about the most powerful tribe, the Volkihar, paranoid and cruel, whose very breath could freeze their victims' blood in their veins. They lived beneath the ice of remote and haunted lakes, never venturing into the world of men except to feed. Movarth left the chapel that same night, and did not return until midnight 4 days hence. There was a fresh scar on his cheek, and Movarth revealed something that even the elderly priest had not known. The Volkihar can reach through the ice of their lakes without breaking it. Next, Movarth asked about the tribes of Valenwood, and the priest was pleased to offer his expertise once more. There were the Bonsamu, who were indistinguishable from Bosmer, except when seen by candlelight. The Kharilf, who could disintegrate into mist, and were invulnerable underwater. The Akef, who swallowed men whole. The dread Telboth, who preyed on children, eventually taking their place in the family, waiting patiently for years before murdering them all in their unnatural hunger. Weeks passed, and Movarth returned to the chapel, again wielding supplementary knowledge gained firsthand. "You were wrong about the Kharilf being unable to vaporize when pushed underwater," he said, patting the priest's shoulder fondly. "Fortunately, they cannot travel far in their mist form, and I was able to track it down." Finally, Movarth asked after the most mysterious of the bloodlines, that of Cyrodiil. A grin stretched across the priest's face, and the candlelight was caught in a labyrinth of intersecting wrinkles. There was but one tribe in Cyrodiil, a powerful clan who had ousted all other competitors, much like the Imperials themselves had done to their ancient elven adversaries. Their true name was unknown, lost in history, but they were experts at concealment. If they kept themselves well fed, they were indistinguishable from living persons. They were cultured, more civilized than the vampires of the other provinces, preferring to feed on victims while they were asleep, unaware. Movarth rubbed his chin, knowing that a vampire of this clan would be hard to track, and even harder to catch inconspicuously. He left the chapel and didn't return for a month. When he did, he was exasperated. The Master Hunter had not found a single vampire of this covert clan. The priest brought the light up to his face and smiled. Movarth was surprised, even stunned by the pallor of the cleric's flesh, the dark hunger in his ageless eyes, and the teeth. It was certainly the teeth that surprised the man who could not afford to be surprised. "I haven't fed in 72 hours, the priest explained as he fell on the hunter. Movarth did not land the first blow, or the last. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. Of all the undead inhabiting Tamriel, the vampires are the most enigmatic, and without a doubt the most sinister. They instill more than just a fear of death upon mortals. It's an ominous and oppressive sense of dread that seeps into the skin and taints the blood. Tales of the many clans, tribes and bloodlines are always uniquely terrifying, and play on deep-set anxieties. A zombie may feast on your corpse, a territorial draga may butcher you for trespassing, a ghost will haunt the site of its death, or the source of its greatest regret, and there is a desperate arrogance to any mortal mad enough to pursue lichdom, that would see them slaughter anyone for a chance at eternal life. But vampires, their malevolence is much more profound than mere bloodlust. Vampires thrive on fear as much as they do blood. They often torment their victims, and even as early as contracting one of the vampiric diseases, the afflicted will be enthralled by vivid nightmares. Vampires of the Iliac Bay Chapter 1 states that vampirism is a disease, like brain rot or cholera, but far, far more insidious. If the victim sleeps after the attack, but before he becomes a vampire, his sleep will be plagued with nightmares. Some of these nightmares, documented by the Nerevarine and the Champion of Cyrodiil, include: in your dream, you see a beautiful young woman holding an infant to her breast. It is only as you draw near that you realise that the woman is a desiccated corpse, and the child is purple and bloated, dying of plague. As mother and child crumble to dust, you awaken. And in your dream, an old wise woman treats you for burns on your hands. As she applies a salve to your skin, you feel the tingle of magic as the pain begins to subside. But as you watch, the flesh of your hands begins to bubble, crack and split, falling in chunks to the floor of her hut. As the wise woman smiles, you wake up. Just as terror is essential to contracting vampirism, it has also been present since the very invention of the disease. In the early days of the First Era, when Tamriel was still young, and the Nedic nomads inhabited the northern reaches of Skyrim, the dreadlord Molag Bal hatched a vile scheme. The Prince of Domination did more than create vampires. He instilled them with his own spite and malice. As brighter grows light, darker becomes shadow. So it passed that the Daedra Molag Bal looked on Arkay and fought the Aedra prideful over his dominion over the death of man and Mer. Bal, whose sphere is the wanton oppression and entrapment of mortal souls, sought to thwart Arkay, who knew that not man, nor Mer, nor beastfolk of all Nirn could escape eventual death. The Aedra was doubtless of his sphere, and so Molag Bal set upon Nirn to best death. In the Fourth Era of a realm that has long since passed its intended expiry, mortal understanding of magic is vast and well established. Prolific mages are more concerned with the categorization of spells in the ever-changing array of schools, as opposed to the discovery of new sorceries. But long ago, in the late Malefic, early First Eras, magic was an exciting and perilous frontier, and the vanguard was led by the finest elven wizards. It fell to the Dureni to crack open the doors of Oblivion without its screaming horrors spilling uncontrollably into Mundus. And in their endeavours, the Dureni formed the foundations of what would become conjuration magic. Meanwhile, the Aelids, when evading the armies of Saint Alicia, were innovating forms of alteration magic like levitation and water breathing to avoid capture. So, when Molag Bal came to Nirn to carry out his reprehensible ploy, the Nedic tribes of Skyrim were largely unfamiliar with the nefarious influence of the Daedra and the egregious potential of arcane forces in malevolent hands. The Lord of Brutality walked Tamriel in the aspect of a man, and found a virgin priestess of Arkay among the Nedic settlers of the north. Even in his man shape, Bal showed no mercy in his savage profanity of the young woman. The stories say her screams became the shrieking winds that still haunt certain winding fjords in Skyrim. When the unspeakable act was over, and this pure priestess was sullied by his corruption, Bal shed a lone droplet of his blood on her brow. Having sown his wrath, he left Nirn. Violated and comatose, LeMay was found by nomads, and cared for. A fortnight hence, the nomad weird woman enshrouded LeMay in a pall, for she had passed into death. In their way, the nomads built a bonfire to immolate the husk. To these tribal humans of the early First Era, death was final. The varieties of undeath we know exist in Mundus were not common knowledge. The nomads saw before them an innocent youth, slain for her silence, likely at the hands of another mortal. So that night, when LeMay rose from her funeral pyre, shrouded in flames, the gathered crowd were given their first glimpse of the horrors of Oblivion. LeMay set upon the coven. She ripped the throats of the women, ate the eyes of the children, and violated the men as cruelly as Bal had ravished her. LeMay became known as Blood Matron, and she imprecated her foul aspect upon the folk of Tamriel, and begat a brood of countless abominations, from which came the vampires, most cunning of the night horrors. And so was the scourge of undeath wrought upon Tamriel, cruelly mocking Arkay's rhythm of life and death through all the coming eras of the Atada. And for all his sadness, Arkay knew this could not be undone. I'm sure the origin story of vampires on Nirn is one you've heard before, and we've delved into the lore of these preternatural, undying creatures and their many clans and bloodlines on the channel before. But what I'm interested in today is the motivations behind the way vampires act. They are powerful, unaging monsters, with abilities that are inexplicable even to the most enlightened acolytes of Magnus. Some become incorporeal, others swallow men whole, some are completely immune to the cold, others are nigh impossible to identify from a common mortal. Yet in almost every instance, a vampire will make sport of their hunt for fresh blood. They so often take pleasure in the chase, in the pervasive rumours that haunt the restless minds of insomniacs, and make parents call their children home before nightfall. Hircine concerns himself with lycanthropes, not vampires, yet he would be quick to identify this trait in them. As Lord of the Hunt, Hircine knows a sportsman when he sees one. He smells the fear in his fleeing quarries. He tastes the anxious atmosphere when blood will soon be spilled across the forest floor. There are few creatures in Mundus who relish the chase like vampires. So why do these blood drinkers use fear and torment so often? Is it simply a byproduct of Molag Bal's desire to dominate that has passed hereditarily onto the blood matron's brood? Possibly, but the Prince of Domination is efficient in his distribution of torture. In the slave pits of Cold Harbour, Dremora servants fill quotas of torment, administering an adequate amount of brutality to break the will of every mortal slave. But there are aspects innate to vampires that lead to another, more obscure prince, and her name is Vaermina, the mistress of nightmares. In our recent Vaermina podcast, and Michael's meticulously researched video on the Dreamweaver, we broached the idea that Vaermina's sphere of nightmares is a small aspect of a larger domain, fear. If you'd like an in-depth look at this topic, links to both of those videos are in the description. But I believe Vaermina played a role in the creation of vampires, even if Bal took all the credit. Now this is all speculative, but I will be using some canon sources to support it. At the end of the day, you can draw your own conclusions. The first and most obvious association comes with the nightmares bestowed upon infected mortals during incubation. But the existence of vampires in this form offers a great deal of benefit to the Weaver. If Vaermina thrives on fear, and this psychological resource fuels her, making her influence potent across Tamriel, then she would want the vampire menace to run rampant. To add to this, there is an interesting exchange between Molag Bal and the Nerevarine in 3rd Era 427. When seeking a cure for the disease, the Nerevarine understandably approached the father of vampires. Molag Bal says, "It was not easy for me to obtain the cure, but I was able to pry it from Vaermina after some discussion." Why would Vaermina possess the cure for vampirism unless she was involved in their creation? And I think we can all gather what Bal meant by discussion. Vaermina is too powerful to be physically dominated by Bal, and while this is all speculation of course, I expect Vaermina to be much more manipulative than him. If she has a scheme, she would use Bal to enact it. More than likely though, these princes consensually collaborated on the creation of vampirism and on the access to its cure. Bal benefits from creating an abomination to spite Arkay, while Vaermina benefits from the abundance of fear that follows in the wake of these undead, bloodthirsty beings. I believe these two princes engaged in violent, vigorous discussion. The spawn of this procreation was bestowed upon Lemay, the mortal host and blood matron. In birthing this race of life-defiling blood drinkers, Bal and Vaermina instilled some fundamental traits into the offspring. Vampires were made to employ fear as a weapon, but also to sully the purity of living things. This is even more conjecture on my part, but perhaps vampires have a particular taste for decay. In the real world, fear and stress can have a significant effect on the quality of meat. Simply put, stress detrimentally affects glycogen stores in the body, which causes meat to spoil quicker after slaughter. Dark, firm, dry, or DFD meat occurs when these stores are depleted, preventing the production of lactic acid, which is needed to lower the pH level of cells. Thus, an absence of glycogen causes meat to spoil quicker. Okay, that wasn't exactly simply put, and I apologize if I've spoiled anyone's dinner, but the reason I bring this up is due to Molag Bal's motivation for creating vampires in the first place. Arkay is vehemently opposed to the undead, because the cycle of life and death is sacred. Once a mortal dies, their body returns to Nirn, and their soul ascends to Aetherius. Zombies and skeletons and other undead abominations rot and decay, and Arche abhors them. But Molag Bal relishes in these foul corruptions of the flesh. With Vaermina's sphere of fear, vampires sow terror across the realm, and this fear raises the victim's blood pressure and heart rate, and hastens their decay. And as such, vampires are the ultimate tool for both Molag Bal the Corrupter and Vaermina the Lady of Nightmares. There is a lot about Vaermina that remains a mystery. We here at Fudge Muppet want to see her explored more than any other Daedric prince in the Elder Scrolls 6. Is Vaermina the mother of vampires? Is she Molag Bal's former lover and co-conspirator? Whatever the case may be, there is no denying that vampires are agents of fear and serve her ends whether they mean to or not. And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Drew, this is Fudge Muppet, and I'll see you in the next one.